Tuesday, June 4th, 2024. I'm going to go ahead and call it New Moon because I probably will not talk to you guys again before we are in a waxing phase. So why don't we go ahead and call it New Moon? Sound fair? I think that sounds fair. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody is enjoying Milky Way season. I think it is fair to say that it is officially upon us at this point. I guess that's officially upon us at this point. And it's starting to come up fairly early in the night now. I guess if you're, staying up late like most of us do as astronomers, you're going to be able to see it around midnight now, which is pretty awesome. So I know I've certainly had quite a few late nights / early mornings already this year. My wife thinks I'm crazy every time I wake up at 3:30 in the morning to go photograph the Milky Way, but I just can't help myself. I love doing it, and I'm sure many of you do as well. On top of it being new moon, in just a few days from now, there is something else that is happening just a few days from now, and that is my annual dark sky trip. So me and my buddy Chris will be heading out to our Bortle 1 site, about an 8-hour drive from where we are. We've got a hotel that's a little ways off from where we actually set up, but not too terribly far. Luckily, it's in a really small town without much light pollution that's pretty far away from the actual site. So we tend to stay all night and then sleep during the day when we go out. Weather forecast doesn't look phenomenal right now, but it doesn't look awful either. It looked awful a few days ago, and I actually asked him if he would be willing to switch things up in the event of a disastrous weather forecast and head up to Cherry Springs. Because if you don't know, on the East Coast, Cherry Springs, Pennsylvania, the astronomy park, or whatever you want to call it, observation park, is an amazing place to view from. They hold some of the best star parties on the East Coast at Cherry Springs, and I actually have not been there yet. So that is high on my list of places to go and check out. So it certainly wouldn't be a downer if we had to go to Cherry Springs, but going where we go is, definitely something we like to do every year. It's a bit of a ritual for us. So we would prefer to go to our usual spot, but if we can't because of the weather, then we can't. So that's the one thing we can't control as much as we would like to. And we've been looking forward to this really since last time we got back. And what's great about astronomy and astrophotography is you really can palpably see your skills increase year over year. So when I look back to the photos that we got last year, I say to myself, man, I can do a lot better now with the knowledge that I've gained since the last time that I was out there. And I can't wait to see what I'm capable of, the next time we get out in those dark skies. And I have new gear now. Obviously, I've got new and better gear that I want to be able to test out. And there's a million reasons why I can't wait to get back out there with Chris and just check out those awesome dark skies. So I'm really hoping that the weather continues to improve. If it doesn't, then we might switch it up and head up to Cherry Springs. So we will see. I do know I looked up Cherry Springs is actually having their big annual star party this weekend during new moon. So the day that we would be showing up would be the end of their star party. So I don't know how that would work out for us. Hopefully we could get a spot. I would imagine most people would be taking off on Sunday, but I'm sure there would be, lots of people that would hang around still afterwards. So, hopefully we could get a spot if we needed to. I would definitely, call ahead, but nonetheless, I'm sure we could make it work in a pinch. So it was kind of weird the way things worked out because obviously we plan to go during new moon each year, but me and my wife actually bought tickets to go see a show well before we set the date for our dark sky trip. And go figure, of course, the night of the show is the night of new moon. So I couldn't skip the show because it's something that I'm very much looking forward to, but we had to, kind of go a couple of days after new moon, which is fine because, we're going to have a tiny little slice of the moon in the sky for 1 hour the first night and a couple hours the next two. We go for 3 nights. So it's not like it's a big deal by any means, but go figure. Of course that would happen to me. But yeah, so very much looking forward to that. If you didn't listen to the show last week, just a heads up, the show next week is going to be a little bit delayed. I am going to be putting an episode up next week, but it's going to be coming out on Friday or Saturday. It kind of depends on, how quickly I get home and how much stuff I have to do because, being gone for a few days, I'll have a lot to do when I get home, undoubtedly. So I do plan on putting the episode up, but expect it to be, a few days later than normal. So definitely have that to look forward to. And please wish me luck. I certainly hope we get some clear skies because when we do get clear skies out there, it's absolutely incredible. And the view of the Milky Way is hard to beat. I've never seen anything like it. I think the only thing that can beat it is, high elevation Milky Way, which is what we would get in Cherry Springs. But from what I understand, I don't know. Maybe one of you guys can tell me if you've been to Cherry Springs. Let me know. Is it a little bit brighter than a Bortle 2 now? Because I've heard some people say that the light is starting to creep in on that site a lot more than it was just 10 years ago. And I mean that's happening everywhere, so that wouldn't surprise me. But I don't know if that's the case. I'm sure it's still an incredible view up there. But I do know it's about, I think 3,000 feet elevation up that way. So very good elevation. And elevation, if you don't know, they say for every 1,000 feet of elevation, it adds roughly another magnitude of stars that you can see. So, try adding, 3 magnitudes of stars on top of, Bortle 2 skies. And you're talking a really amazing view. So that could definitely be worth checking out, but I'm hoping we can just go with our original plan and not have to switch things up and sleep in a tent for 3 nights. But the goal is dark skies. So whatever we have to do to get dark skies is what we're going to do. So a few words before we get into today's topic. I wanted to mention we've been getting some new members on our Patreon site. And one thing I've really quickly realized is Patreon is not a great platform for messaging. And one of the things that I really like about having the Patreon is that it allows you guys to connect directly with me. If you have any questions for me directly, if you have a question that you want me to ask on the show, or if you just have a question in general about astrophotography that you would like help with, if I can help you with it. And if I can't, I can certainly point you in the right direction, I would like to think. But I've noticed that it's not a really good platform because I don't get notifications right away when you guys send me a message. Sometimes it seems like I don't get them at all, but I try to go in there every day and check. But I don't have a ton of members yet, so they're intermittent when I'm getting these notifications. But it's really important to me that anybody who is a member of the Patreon is able to get in touch with me, anytime that they want to, frankly. So what I'm going to be doing over the next week is I'm going to be setting up a Patreon members Discord server. So for all of our existing members and any new members who would like to join at patreon.com/theastrocast, you will be getting access to our members only Discord server. We will have a live chat where you can go on there and chat with me and other members as well. So if you ever want to catch up, just talk, you're welcome to do that. But if you have questions for me, if you have a question you'd like to ask on the show, that will be the place to do it. So of course you can feel free to reach out to me on Patreon as well. But the faster way to get with me is going to be the Discord, because Discord is very good about sending notifications. And really, it's just got a whole lot better chat tools. And as the Patreon grows, we'll be able to add more features onto the Discord, which is really cool. And that's something that I'm very much looking forward to. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can join the Patreon at patreon.com/the Astrocast. And I will be posting the information for the Discord server to the members at the Patreon over the coming week. So certainly look forward to that. Speaking of websites, this week I thought it would be an interesting time to talk about tools. So over the last couple of weeks, as I've been preparing for this dark sky trip, I have been studying up on Milky Way photography. And I've done Milky Way photography a lot in the past, but not nearly as much as I've done deep sky photography. So, your classic astrophotography where you shoot nebula, at 250 millimeters or more, I guess you could say, actually even 135 millimeters or more, because I have my Rokinon 135. I would consider that deep field. But, like your 16 millimeter or even 50 millimeter, your wide field stuff of the Milky Way core or the Milky Way proper. And I decided that one of the things that I really want to do while I am out at the dark sky location is get a mosaic of the Milky Way, a really good high definition mosaic that I can print a very large print of the Milky Way. And I talked about this a little bit on last week's episode, and there's a whole lot of reasons why you may want to do a mosaic. Chief among them is you can capture a wider area than you would be able to, even if you have a very wide lens. Like, for example, I have a Rokinon 14 millimeter lens that I can attach to my full frame Canon R5 camera. But even with that, if I want to capture the entire Milky Way, I need to be able to do 2 shots at a minimum. And then to be able to get a really good view of it, you'd really want 2 shots on the bottom and then 2 shots on the top. And then you'd want to make a mosaic to stitch them together. So while I was looking into how to do this, I was looking through, YouTube videos, etc. And I started stumbling across various tools online. And while I was going through these tools, I started discovering some tools that I didn't know about before. And some of them were tools that I had heard of, but I had never actually used. And I'm starting to regret never having used those, because a couple of these I'm realizing are absolutely amazing tools. And I wish I had used them sooner is all that I can say. But I'll admit that I think I was being a bit of an astro elitist, because I had told myself that I had PixInsight, and that's the best software that there is. It's the best software money can buy. So why do I even need to look at any of these other tools? And then I found Sequitur. And Sequitur is a tool that is excellent at stacking Milky Way images. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that PixInsight can't stack Milky Way photos as good or better than Sequitur. But what I will tell you is that if you have a stack of, let's say, Rokinon 14 millimeter lens shots from a full frame camera, like I just explained to you, let's say you have 10-second exposures over the course of an hour from a Bortle 5 site. So, reasonably dark, but not, great dark. And you want to make a really good stack, and you want to do it quickly without having to fuss around too much and without having to pay $300 for a tool. Sequitur is going to do that for you very quickly. It's going to do it for you very easily. And best of all, it's going to do it for you free. So that's going to be the first tool that we're going to talk about today is Sequitur. So I found it when I was just searching around for videos. Actually, a couple of the people had suggested it for stacking their Milky Way images. So I actually had some data left over from last year's dark sky trip that I never really messed with because unfortunately it was not perfectly in focus. So these were my Milky Way shots that I had hoped to stack when I got home. I think I had used my 16 millimeter Canon lens, the not the terribly expensive 16, but like the $200 RF 16 millimeter lens. And it was, like I say, I was still pretty new to Milky Way at the time. And unfortunately for me, apparently I did not take my time focusing. It looked focused whenever I was looking at the tiny back screen of the R7. And maybe it was focused at first, but apparently it didn't stay focused because whenever I got home and loaded them up, I realized that they weren't really in focus all the way through the image. Only, part of the image was in focus. So the data was pretty much useless to me. So I put it on the back burner and that's where it stayed for the longest time. So about a year later, because here we are a year later and I'm preparing for next year's dark sky trip, I discovered Sequitur. And I was thinking about it and I said, well, I have PixInsight and I've got Blur Exterminator. And I know Blur Exterminator can do some pretty incredible stuff with terrible looking stars. So why not give it a go? So I took all of the data that I still had because I keep all of my data from my shoots, particularly the ones from dark sky trips. And I loaded it into Sequitur. And I followed a simple video tutorial for how to stack the data. And long story short, I was able to stack all of the data. And then I took the file out of Sequitur and I loaded it up in PixInsight and I ran it through Blur Exterminator. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was an incredible image, but it was a heck of a lot better than what I had before, which was nothing. And now I am using that image as the bar to beat for this year. So anytime that I go back, I want to be able to have an image to beat. So, I want to see myself getting better each and every year. And I have plenty of nebula images from last year that I'm going to be challenging myself to beat this year. But I didn't have a true Milky Way shot to beat from last year other than a single 10-second exposure that I really love, but it's nothing that you would print out. It's a super noisy image with the silhouette of me and my buddy pointing up at the Milky Way. And honestly, it's one of my favorite photos I've ever taken, but it's not a quality photo by any means. But now I've got something to, hold a bar against. And, I think I'll be able to beat it handily. I do. But at least I have something to hold it up against now. And I wouldn't have that if it weren't for Sequitur, because it wouldn't have even occurred to me to try to stack that data in PixInsight, because I wouldn't have wanted to go through all the pain of trying to, plate solve and align and get all that working in PixInsight. I don't know. Maybe there's a simpler way to do it through weighted batch pre-processing, but frankly, I wouldn't even mess with it. But Sequitur is just so simple. It just works. So highly recommend you give that a try. It was easier than stacking in anything I've ever used, including, Photoshop, Deep Sky Stacker, all of them. So for Milky Ways, definitely check out Sequitur. Let me grab the website for you, and I will also put the website in the notes for you for all of the things that we're going to talk about today, of course. And let's see here. Sequitur is actually at startools.org, and they have several other tools on there. Some of them are really good, like Cyril and Deep Sky Stacker, Fitzwork, Astap. Lots of other great tools. But for today on that site, we're just going to talk about Sequitur. So definitely give that one a look. All right. So, what do you do with your Milky Way photos? Where do you put them? Well, if you're an experienced astrophotographer, you may know about this one. If you don't know about this one, I'm probably about to open your eyes up to a whole new world for you to explore. And that, of course, is AstroBin. AstroBin is just maybe one of my favorite websites that's ever existed. It's just an incredible collection and forum. It's just the best place to go for astrophotography on the internet. So it has an image of the day, not unlike what APOD does, and I'm going to get into APOD later. Spoiler alert, I think what AstroBin does is better than APOD, but we'll talk about that later. And more importantly, it has an equipment exploring tool. And what I mean by that is anytime that I am considering a new piece of equipment, and specifically I'm talking about cameras, lenses, or telescopes or filters, you can go on to AstroBin and you can use their search function to search for pictures taken with a specific piece of equipment. So, for example, if I wanted to know what a photo taken with the new William Optics Pleiades telescope looked like, I could go on to astrobin.com and do an equipment search and just type in William Optics Pleiades under the item class telescope or lens. And then all of the members who have ever uploaded a photo from that class of telescope or lens, their images are going to appear. Furthermore, you can set up your own profile on AstroBin and you can add all of your equipment to it. And then you can upload your own photos from your equipment, and you can even set up notifications so you get notifications for equipment that you are specifically interested in. So like, for example, whenever I was having trouble with my Rokinon 135 last year, before I got it properly set up and tuned, because I was having all the tilt issues, if you remember me talking about that many episodes ago, I wanted to know what other people, were getting with their Rokinon 135. And by using AstroBin, I was able to see, well, first of all, I was able to see that I wasn't alone, that some other people did indeed have trouble in the corners. But I was also able to see that some people were getting great results. So I knew that there had to be a way to fix this because some people were getting phenomenal results. So partly that's what pushed me to keep working towards perfecting that setup. Had I gone on to AstroBin and seen that everybody had, terrible stars in the corners, then I might have given up on that lens and went and got, a small refractor astrograph because, for me, quality is very, very important. And if a lens or a telescope, for that matter, looks terrible in the corners, I'm just not interested in it, even if it is f2.8. Or f2, I should say. So that's just me personally, and your actual motives may vary, but the tools are great. So they offer both free and paid versions. I'm currently on the free version, but I'm really strongly leaning towards getting the premium version because they offer you a lot of great features for the paid version. I think the free version only allows you to upload 10 images, while you get a lot more with the premium. And I think the ultimate version that they have gives you unlimited uploads. There's also a file size limit with the free version, obviously, because, hosting costs money, obviously. And then you also get some advanced search features with the pro versions. And then an ad-free experience as well, which is really great. Obviously, ads are I hate ads. Don't get me started. I do so much in my life to avoid ads. I'm looking over to my right now. I have a server cabinet set up in my garage here in my studio, and I've got a Raspberry Pi hooked up to my Ubiquiti server, and it is running a service called Pi-hole. Little brief aside here. If you are a little bit of a nerd like me and you also hate advertisements, I would highly encourage you to look into Pi-hole. So it's basically let me think, how can I explain this? It's a piece of software that you run on a Raspberry Pi, and it basically replaces your DNS server on your router. So all DNS requests have to go directly to your Raspberry Pi, and it filters out pretty much any ads that you want. So by default, you can set it to have popular lists by default that will basically filter out all the ads that are, rampant on the internet. And then if there's something that you kind of have to have, like, for example, if there's a game that you play and you can't play it on your phone because a certain ad needs to be able to pop up, you can go in and easily whitelist it. There's also a way that you can go on and turn it off for, 30 minutes at a time if you need to do something specifically to whitelist, yada, yada, yada. But Pi-hole has been an awesome addition to my home network. So if you want to get rid of ads on your home network, highly recommend you look into Pi-hole. You don't have to have a Raspberry Pi to run it. You can actually run it in a container. You can spin up an Amazon server online and run it that way. But running it on a Raspberry Pi has a lot of advantages, not the least of which is it just, runs at your house, plugged into your router. And it's super easy to run. Everything goes directly through it. It doesn't slow down your network at all, which is great. That was one of my big worries, but no, it doesn't slow it down. So definitely give that a look if you're like me and you hate ads. But yeah, Astrobin, amazing website. Like I say, you can do that with telescopes, but you can also do it with filters. So if you wanted to buy a new filter and you wanted to see what kind of job it did, you could search for the filter, and anybody who uploads a photo using that filter, it will list it. You can do it for mounts, accessories, software, cameras, sensors, you name it, they have it. So awesome software, and I highly recommend checking it out. I've been using Astrobin for, as long as I got into astronomy, I think. It was one of the very first sites that I found, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. I can spend hours and hours on that website just looking through people's different photos, because it's just such a cool site to, discover new astrophotographers, and, people can comment on photos. So it's a great way to get feedback too. So definitely love that site. So big props to the community over at Astrobin. So the next site that I want to mention to you is called astronomy.tools. So astronomy.tools has a lot of tools on it that a lot of the other sites have as well, to be honest with you. But it's got a couple of unique tools that make it really special. So first of all, it's got lots of different calculators. So you've got a field of view calculator that'll show you can pick out a certain Messier object. So a specific nebula, and then you can enter in your telescope's focal length and what kind of camera you're using. And it's going to give you an idea of exactly what the field of view is going to look like for that particular object. And that's wonderful. It also has a star chart. You can look up specific coordinates. You can even get a cloud forecast on Astronomy Tools. But what I really love about astronomy.tools is their CCD suitability tool. And what I mean by that is it is able to calculate your camera's resolution and arc seconds per pixel very easily. So it can calculate your arc seconds per pixel for a particular camera with a particular telescope. So if you've ever heard an astronomer or astrophotographer talk about pixel size for good seeing and making sure you have good sampling so you're not undersampled or oversampled, and you haven't quite understood what they meant by that, this is a really easy way to, frankly, not have to worry about that. I won't get into explaining exactly what undersampled and oversampled means. Maybe I will do an episode on that. There's actually some things I want to talk about later with you about some of the more advanced topics that we are going to be getting into in future episodes. But we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But for now, suffice to say, if you want to know if your scope or camera combination is undersampled, oversampled, or just right, this is an excellent tool to figure that out. Now, I will tell you that don't let it like destroy you if you come in here and see that you're in the yellow zone instead of the green zone, because that doesn't mean that, you know, you have a terrible setup or anything like that. Don't think of it that way at all, especially with the modern tools that we have today. Using something like Blur Exterminator, for example, and PixInsight, we are able to reduce, you know, so many of the sampling issues that we may have with modern cameras and telescope combinations. But what I find it particularly useful for is if I'm buying new gear and I want to make sure that it mates together well. What I wouldn't use it for is if you already have an existing setup and you want to go and check behind yourself. Don't bother, because you're just going to beat yourself up and say, oh man, I bought this camera and it doesn't match up perfectly according to these numbers. If you're happy with your setup, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I say that as somebody who found out after the fact that, you know, one of my telescopes doesn't match up perfectly with the 294. But then I found out that the 294 doesn't really match up perfectly with many telescopes just because of the size of its pixels. And that's okay. The pictures still look great. But if you're buying new equipment, like a telescope or a camera, and you do want to make sure that the sampling, works out great, then this is an excellent way to do that. So it's a super easy tool. You just go to astronomy.tools. You're going to click on calculators and then CCD suitability. And then from there, you have drop-down menus and just a few basic things to fill out. You can basically choose a telescope, or you can just select custom telescope. And all it's looking for is the focal length of your telescope. If you don't know what the focal length of your telescope is, it's usually written on the front of the scope right by the lens, or of course you can Google it. I would be willing to bet most of you know the focal length of your telescope. You can enter whether or not you're using a Barlow or a reducer. You don't really have to put in if you're using a reducer. If you are using a reducer and you know what the reduced focal length is, you can just put that in, and then enter in your pixel size and whether or not you are binning. And then there is also a drop down to enter in what you're seeing is like. Most people in most areas are going to have okay or poor seeing. I say, urban and suburban seeing is okay to poor seeing, and that's anywhere from 2 to 5 arc seconds. So definitely check that out if you haven't. It's an awesome tool. And like I say, if you're buying new equipment, it's a really, really good tool to access. Another really cool thing that I want to mention before we jump to the next tool, it does have a field of view calculator, and it's easy to skip over that because we use Stellarium so often, I feel like, for field of view calculations. But I really love its binocular field of view calculator, because I'm not sure if Stellarium has a binocular feature. I'll have to go look, but either way, it's got a really, really great binocular feature where you can go in and pick a specific pair of binoculars. It has most of the popular brands. You could also just select custom pair, put in the aperture and the magnification, and it will actually show you exactly what any given object in the night sky. You can pick anything from the Messier catalog, or you can actually enter in a specific object's name, and it's going to show you exactly what that will look like through the binoculars, which I think is really cool. Obviously, you can do the same thing with the telescope's field of view, or astrophotography field of view, camera, etc. But I really dig that they do that for binoculars as well. If you don't have a good pair of binoculars, I highly recommend you get a pair, especially if you have the pleasure of making it out to a dark site occasionally. If you can go anywhere that is Bortle 4 or lower more than a couple of times a year, you really owe it to yourself to get a nice pair of binoculars, because when you can make it out to a dark site like that with a pair of nice binoculars, it really is like a whole other world of astronomy is opened up to you. Particularly like this time of year when you can look towards the core of the Milky Way, that is mind-blowing stuff. Also in the winter, I remember the first time I was able to look over Cassiopeia with a really clear, great seeing dark night at a Bortle 4 site. I was just blown away by all the clusters that I was able to see. They were just everywhere, it seemed like. And that was just incredible. So astronomy.tools, obviously all of these tools are going to be in the show notes, but highly recommend give that one a look. All right. So speaking of seeing, so we're talking about seeing, and that kind of leads me into our next tool, or tools, I suppose you could say. So these next two are both very similar, and I think it's going to kind of depend on which one you prefer. I'll just give them both out. So cleardarksky.com, better known as Clear Sky Chart, and astropheric.com. I personally prefer astropheric.com, but I know lots of people who prefer clearskychart.com or cleardarksky.com. I always get those two confused because it says the Clear Sky Chart homepage, but it's actually cleardarksky.com. So that kind of messes me up. But again, I'll put the link in the show notes. These are awesome weather reporting websites. So like me, you may have, when you first got it started, just gone to weather.com and looked to see if it was cloudy outside or not. And I'm here to tell you that's not good enough. If you're into astronomy, you're going to need to know more than that at some point. You're going to need to know what the transparency is like. You're going to need to know better about cloud cover, because just saying, partly cloudy isn't good enough. Is it high clouds? Is it low clouds? Is the seeing good? Is it bad? Is it great? You're not going to know that looking at weather.com. What you're going to know is that it's, 20% cloudy. And if you pay $9.99 a month, then you can unlock, an extra 24 hours of weather or whatever. Their site kind of drives me nuts because I used to go to weather.com all the time, and all they do is bombard you with ads and attempts to take your money for more features that are readily available on other websites for free. So I actually have a computer set up in my garage that has a monitor that is on 24/7 that shows nothing but Astropheric. And the reason why I like Astropheric over Clear Sky Chart is because it actually shows a map over your local location or whatever location you choose, and it'll actually show you the physical clouds that are in the area. And it's just, in my opinion, a little bit more customizable. There's actually an API that you can pull to, and you may be able to do that with Clear Sky Chart as well. Forgive me, I'm not trying to bash the other one. They're both awesome tools. I just happen to use Astropheric more. But if you use Clear Sky Chart more, all the power to you. They're both incredible tools. For all I know, they both run on the same API because they're both very similar. But Great tools. And like I say, they're going to tell you things like cloud cover, transparency, seeing. They're going to tell you the wind conditions, the temperature. They're going to tell you the dew point, which is very, very, very good to know. We always bring our dew heaters out, but you don't necessarily have to. If you've got a very low dew point and you know that the temperature is going to be way above it for the night, then you might not necessarily need to bring your dew heaters out. If the temperature is not going to fall below the dew point, then you might not necessarily need to worry about dew heaters for any given night. So just something to keep in mind. I am not a meteorologist, so perhaps what I just said is wrong information, but to my understanding, that's how the dew point works. I could be wrong about that, but maybe someone will correct me. If I am wrong about that, please shoot me an email, ruastrocast@gmail.com. But yeah, these are awesome tools. Like I say, I run Astrophotographer 24/7, and anytime I walk out to my garage, I love to have a quick glance at it just to see, what the weather is going to be like. They both have really easy to understand color coded charts on them that once you get a feel for them as far as how they read, you'll be able to very quickly understand without even having to go click on anything what the weather is going to be like that night. And basically the way they work is if it's darker, it's better. So dark blue means no clouds and white means clouds. And the darker the colors, the better the colors. And then they just have the days set up by hours. So you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then it repeats AM, PM, AM, PM. And then you get, several days in advance that you can look through and see, what the weather is going to be like. So I love Astropheric and Clear Sky Chart. Highly recommend both of those. So definitely give them both a look and, give them both a try and see which one works best for you. And they will definitely change your game if you start making them part of your regular process. All right, so I knew we were going to get to this one at some point, and we got to talk about it. It's APOD. APOD is a bit of a controversial website in the astrophotography community. And the reason that it is controversial is because getting chosen for an APOD used to be a very, very prestigious award, essentially, among the astrophotography community. However, over the last couple of years, a lot of, let's say, less than stellar photos were chosen for whatever reason and become APODs. And APOD stands for Astronomy Picture of the Day. And this is NASA's official photo of the day for astronomy. So to give you a little background, they've been doing it for years. Anybody can submit a photo to APOD. I have submitted several. I've never been chosen. I'm not bitter because I've never been chosen. Honestly, I don't think any of my photos are quite APOD quality. But then I've seen some of the ones that they've picked that are like terrible. And I'm like, how did they choose that? I honestly don't understand. One of the photos, for example, just to give you an idea what I'm talking about here, was a long exposure with a camera that was shaken. So if you can imagine a camera pointing at stars and then just shaking the camera for a second, and you would obviously get like star trails that are going in a bunch of random directions, that was an APOD. But you also have James Webb photos, Hubble photos, Kepler Observatory photos, the image of Andromeda with the, recently discovered O3 that was above it. Some of the most incredible photos that we've ever seen in the astrophotography world are APODs. And then some of the stuff is just absolutely a joke, frankly. So I don't know what to make of APOD anymore. I do know that you email two people that I guess they're affiliated with NASA. I don't think they have nasa.gov email addresses. I think they go to university email addresses, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I've submitted one. But anyway, they're also connected to a Facebook page called Sky. And I'm not sure how you get chosen for Sky, which I guess is kind of like a runner up to APOD, if you will. I don't know if they comb through APODs that didn't get chosen and use those for Sky, or if you are supposed to tag Sky, like at them or hashtag them or something. I don't know. I never figured that out because it's not really clearly defined on their website. So there needs to be some revamping of that system, frankly. And that's why, honestly, I think Astrobin does a better job of choosing astronomy photo of the day. They just do. So Astrobin has a very democratic process for choosing their image of the day, wherein a much larger group of people select from a group of images, basically all the images that are submitted and made public have a chance to be selected as the image of the day. I think it's like 60 members have the role of submitter, and they can choose to submit from the random sampling that they get to the board that decides who's going to be the image of the day. Forgive me, I don't know all the exact rules, but I know that they have a much larger sample size for who actually reviews these photos. And just generally speaking, it seems like they've got it down. They definitely have a great community. They're promoting great images through the community, and they're doing it in a fair way. It sucks whenever an astrophotographer spends 40 hours working on an image over an entire season, and then, their image gets passed up for somebody who held the shutter open for 8 seconds while pointing at the Big Dipper and shaking their 50 millimeter lens back and forth. I just don't understand that. So I get that, like, they want to have some unique stuff on there, and that, the goal is to draw in people who otherwise would not see astronomy images. But where do you draw the line with that? Because the vast majority of people who are going on a daily basis to look at APODs are going to be the people who are submitting them. So I really wish that NASA would consider revamping its APOD rules, so people would start looking back up to APOD in the same way that we used to. So my rant is over on that one, but I'm telling you, Astrobin's image of the day, it's got my heart for the time being. All that being said, if you do want to look over some really great images, APOD still does have an excellent backlog of really incredible images. The vast majority of them are very, very good images. It's just that every once in a while they'll put up something that will make you absolutely scratch your head. But they still have a lot of really incredible stuff on there. So I'm not saying what I said to like bash the people who choose the images or anything like that. I know that you guys have a hard job looking through the undoubtedly hundreds of photos you probably get submitted on a daily basis. It's probably not an easy job, and that's why I'm saying there should probably be more people to look through them on a daily basis so you have more help. That would just be my suggestion. So all that being said, couple more tools to talk about before we start to wrap things up today. These are a couple of tools that I have mentioned before on the podcast, probably many of times, one of them. But I would be remiss if we were talking about tools that will help you in your astrophotography journey if I did not mention them today. One of them is something that I am very, very passionate about. That is lightpollutionmap.info. And then the other one, which goes hand in hand with lightpollutionmap.info, is Google Earth. And Google Earth is actually available entirely online now. You can absolutely install it as a desktop version, which is what I do because it's got a few features that are not available online that I love to have. But whatever's easier for you, you can absolutely access it just through your browser if that's easier for you to do. But it's a light download, so feel free to just browse online or download it. But lightpollutionmap.info, this is a website that I have spent countless hours on. And the reason that I've spent countless hours on it is because I love traveling to dark sites. And I love traveling to dark sites that I've never been to before. Unfortunately, we live in a world that is getting brighter and brighter every single day. I've probably mentioned to you guys many a times that I live in a Bortle 6, borderline 7 area just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina many times. I am sadly here to report that I officially live in a Bortle 7 now. We have just a milky gray sky at this point. Your eyes don't even really need to adjust anymore when you go outside. I mean, it helps a little bit towards the zenith of the sky. It is darker up there, and if your eyes adjust, you can see a little bit more up that way. But you cannot see any hint of the Milky Way in a Bortle 7, not even little bits and pieces of it at the zenith. None of it. You just can't see any of it. So light pollution map is really important to me because it allows me to find areas within, a reasonable distance away from me that I can drive to get those great skies that I want to see. I use it in combination with Google Earth because what I do is I go onto light pollution map and I look for a green, and if I've got enough time, a blue area. And then I will, find that blue area. And then I will go on to Google Earth and I will start hunting around for what looks like an accessible, safe public area that I can hang out in for, all night long if I can. And, go up there and take photos all night. That's what I did when the aurora came through on May 10th. I was able to find a public graveyard, which was really awesome. And it was in a very, very dark area up in Virginia, actually. So yeah, you can do the same thing basically. Just wherever you live, go ahead and hop on lightpollutionmap.info. And if you're already in a dark sky site, count your lucky blessings because man, you are so lucky if you live in a dark area. I've got a couple of friends that I talk to on Facebook that I've met because of the show, that message me occasionally that live in very dark areas. And I'm so jealous of them because I just don't. And unfortunately, I don't think my wife will ever want to move out to a very, very remote area like I would love to, just because she's such a city person. But I do think I might be able to convince her to buy a small piece of land for like a vacation home somewhere out in a very remote area. And I've actually been looking recently at land up near the Virginia border. There's some really dark skies up near where I was a few weeks back, near the Whitehead area, I guess you would say. Kind of west of Mount Airy. Mount Airy is kind of bright, but if you go west of there, high elevation up in the mountains and very dark up that way. And on top of that, it's very, very dark, which is exactly what I want. And the land's not too expensive. So if I could find a spot like that, maybe build a tiny home or even put a trailer on the property, I'd be perfectly fine with that, just to have an area to go for a weekend image all night and then come home, that would be incredible. So, something like that is just one of my dreams in life. And I really do feel like dreams like that are attainable if we put our minds to them. Because, if you had asked me 11 years ago if I thought buying a $20,000 piece of land and then, putting a small home on it would be something I could ever do, I would have laughed so hard at you. But here I am, a decade later, and it actually is something that I can probably do within the next 10 years. So I just want to tell you, if you're in a tough spot in life right now, things can turn around. I am the living, breathing example of that. We've all been through hard times in the past. I certainly have. But you can turn things around, no matter what you're struggling with, whether it be, depression, addiction, whatever your vices are. We all go through something. Anybody that you see, try not to judge them, because everyone has a story to tell and everybody is going through something. But we all have our problems, but we can all get through them. And at the end of the day, we can all become better, stronger people because of them. So my goal is to be able to really chase my hobbies and make my dreams become a reality. And doing this show is just kind of a small step in that direction for me. I'm not making any money off of this show. I've got obviously a few of our Patreon members that subscribe. Shout out to you guys. Carrie, Wiley, really appreciate everybody who has joined. David as well. Sorry, I forgot to mention you. But there are other goals that I have as well. I work a full-time job, obviously, and I love what I do. But if I could do anything, it would be doing astronomy for a living. And, starting this podcast is kind of my first step in that direction. So creators make a living doing what they love every day. And I hope to one day do that myself. So with that, we'll wrap up that part of today's show. All right. So enough of the sad stuff. Sorry about that. Got a little bit deep for a minute, but I want to address one other thing, because somebody messaged me a couple days ago and they asked me about talking about more advanced topics. They said they love the show and, they love listening every week. But they wanted to know if and when I'm going to start talking about more advanced topics. And yes, Ricky, I do indeed plan to start talking about more advanced stuff. So the goal with this show, as it's probably no surprise to you guys, is mainly to entice beginner level to intermediate level astronomers and astrophotographers to learn more about the basics of astronomy and astrophotography. However, now that we're 20 episodes into the show, I do feel like we have covered a whole lot of the basics. We've covered things like polar alignment. We've covered building a rig. We've covered building a wide field rig. We've covered constellations. We've covered one-shot color cameras. We've covered filters. We've covered building the ultimate wide field rig. Did I say that already? I don't remember. But we've covered a whole lot of stuff over these first 20 episodes. So over the next 20 episodes, I do plan to start tackling some of the more advanced topics. So stay tuned for that. I have to be careful how I approach that because what I don't want to do is drive myself into a corner like I did with the Pix Insight episodes. I really enjoyed making those 2 episodes, but they didn't perform well. And I kind of figured they weren't going to perform well, to be perfectly honest with you, because if I wanted to learn about Pix Insight, I am not going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to go online and I'm going to watch a video that shows me step by step how to do it. Speaking of videos, I am thinking about starting to do a video version of the podcast. I now have a very, very nice lens. I've got a lot of lenses because, as you guys know, I'm also a photographer. I do wildlife photography, astrophotography, obviously. I've got several cameras, and I recently got my first piece of L glass. I got a Canon RF 24-70 lens. It's just an incredible piece of kit, and it would be right at home recording a video of me recording this podcast. So that is something I am strongly considering doing for the future of the show. So keep in mind, if I do that, the format's not going to change. If you still listen on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen, you're still absolutely going to be able to listen there. I would just also post the video to YouTube. So right now, every week, the podcast uploads to the YouTube channel for the Astrocast. It just basically shows a background that has the Astrocast logo on it. But instead, it would also have a video of me talking. So kind of just a video version of the podcast. So let me know if you guys are interested in that. If that's something that you'd like to see, please shoot me an email, ruastrocast@gmail.com. Or feel free to just tag me on social media with hashtag #TheAstrocast with any comments that you have on that. I think it's a good idea, and I think that it will grow the show. So I think I'm going to do it. But I actually consider doing it this week, but I don't have enough time to get all the gear set up properly. And if I do it, I want to do it right. So I need to get the lighting set up. I need to get the backdrop right. I need to get my desk cleaned up so it doesn't look sloppy in here when I do it. So gotta definitely check a lot of boxes before we run that down, but probably by, episode 23 or 24, I'd like to start doing that. So definitely looking forward to that, as well as starting to cover some more advanced topics. So that's really cool. Something that I'm very much looking forward to, and hopefully you get to look forward to it as well. Just as a reminder, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, if you guys want to chat with me and other members, our Patreon is going to be having a Discord chat. I'm going to have that set up over the next couple of days. And if you want to join our Patreon to help support the show and spread the word of the Astrocast, you can join at patreon.com/The Astrocast, and I will be posting the link to the Discord for members only on the Patreon. So if you want to be a member of that and chat with me whenever you'd like, please feel free to join. We have membership levels available at $1 and $5 per month. So that is going to do it for this week. I'm not going to have a regular recommendation like I generally do, because honestly, this whole episode was kind of recommendations. So I'd be kind of silly to name some app that I would recommend, because that's kind of all I did today. So as a reminder, I mentioned it earlier, but next week episode's going to be coming out a little bit late. It'll probably be Friday or Saturday before it drops. So just please bear with me, but cross your fingers for me. The forecast keeps improving. So hopefully, this time, Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night, I will be sitting under the Milky Way capturing the most incredible photos that I have ever captured in my life. And I will certainly be sharing those with you guys when I get back. So I've been looking forward to it for 6 months, guys. Honestly, I've been looking forward to it ever since I got back from the last one. So please cross your fingers for me. The forecast is kind of up in the air right now. I really hope that it clears up. Last year, it looked crappy, and we ended up with 3 excellent nights that got better and better seeing each and every night. So just really, really hoping against all that we get awesome clear weather. So hope for me. And when I get back, I'm going to tell you all about it. So thanks for listening in. You've been tuning in to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Thanks so much. Clear skies.